Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. My name is George Braun, and I'll be talking about how to take better control of your budgeting, planning, or forecasting process. Before we start, I just want to give you a little bit of housekeeping. I just want to make sure everybody can see my screen. If there's any issues, you can just reach out via your chat box to Haley at BAASS, and she'll try and make sure that you're okay. Everyone's going to be muted for this session, but if you have any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat box, and I will answer them at the end of the session, or at least I will try. I just want to give you an idea of the webinar. Today is going to be a high-level overview of TrueSky, which is a budgeting, planning, forecasting tool. We are a partner of BAASS. We've been working with them for a while, and they invited us to do this presentation for their customers. So with that, I'll just get going. So what is TrueSky? So TrueSky is a corporate performance management solution. We fall under what they call a CPM category. And really what that means is we are a tool that provides better control of your budgeting, planning, forecasting process. As well, we also do reporting and dashboarding. So we kind of cover the whole gamut of budgeting and reporting against that. TrueSky has been around for about 7 years, and we've got customers in all kinds of industries. Some are small, some are large. So we're very focused on our budgeting, and we're very strong in that area. We are partners with Sage. We're actually a Rockstar partner with Sage. We're on the price list for their X3 product line. As well, we've got a lot of customers on the Sage 300 platform. So we are very comfortable, and we've got some very strong integrations into that product. So when we built our product, we basically took 3 main pillars on how to build it. So the first one was ease of use. We know how much everybody loves budgeting, so we figured the easier we make the whole process, the easier we make it for the end users, the happier everyone's going to be. Really, the objective of budgeting is to get meaningful numbers about what your budget is, where you're going, and kind of compare to your actuals and make people accountable for it. And in order to do that, you need to have people participating in the process. So our concept is that the easier we make this for everybody, the better. So one of the things we took is Excel. Most people out there are budgeting in Excel, and Excel is a great tool for budgeting, but it's great in a single user environment. But once you get into multi-user environments, it becomes very difficult because you've got to do all the merging, you've got to do integrations into your ERP systems and so forth. So what we did is we took Excel as a user experience, but turned Excel into an enterprise budgeting tool. So we put in all the controls, processes in place to make sure that we take away all the issues and challenges that Excel gives you in the budgeting process. So saying that, the next concept we had was security and controls. Wanted to make sure that we have all the controls in place to give you the right numbers. As I mentioned, Excel is great, but you can do a lot with it. You can make a lot of mistakes. You can fudge a lot of numbers. There's really not too many controls. So at the end of the process, your numbers or what you thought your budget was going to be may not be accurate. And then it's a lot of time and effort going through and trying to figure out, okay, where did we go wrong? What happened? Here are some interesting facts. About 90% of all spreadsheets contain errors. There's been multiple studies on this. And we've been speaking to customers, and they kind of agree. And a lot of them are just simple errors, like copy and paste errors, typos. Some of them can be just putting the wrong sign, a minus sign instead of a plus sign, or a plus sign instead of a multiplication sign. So you can have a lot of those errors. And then if you put on top of it the fact that we're going to be merging multiple spreadsheets in a multi-user environment, if you've got a budget with a lot of people involved, this just kind of gets a lot more complex. A lot of the errors are usually from people adding new rows, new accounts, deleting formulas and things like that. So when that merge comes together, it can be very difficult. So our concept was to eliminate all of that. And then last but not least was to give you reporting and access to information. We wanted to make sure that all of the users in the system get the reporting that they need, whether that's reporting of budget versus actual in their department, their division, their branch, whether it's the corporate level or the enterprise level, at the regional level. So we wanted to make sure that once the data is in our system, we can provide you with reporting on that. And then the other thing we wanted to make sure was to give access to information to users as they're building their budget, to make sure that they have the right information at their fingertips to help them build a budget, whether that's looking at last year's priors, drilling down into that data, seeing where the numbers came from, whether it's looking at other systems for additional information or so forth. So that was kind of the three main pillars that we used to build our product and to try and simplify the whole budgeting process. So with that, I'm going to go into our presentation, into our demo. So I'm just going to move over. And right now I've got an Excel spreadsheet on the screen. Hopefully everybody can see that. And if you can, just kind of reach out to us. So as I mentioned earlier, we decided to use Excel as a user experience, but what we did is we turned Excel into an enterprise budgeting tool by making sure everything's centralized. So in our world, there's no spreadsheets floating around. What happens, a user goes into their Excel and they'll have a tab called TrueSky. As soon as they go into TrueSky, we take over and we start controlling everything that that user does. So when they go in there, they've got three options, well, two options really. They've got a hub and a language. Hub is really the place where they go in to see what they need to do. And here we're starting to spoon feed users on what they can do. So we can give them assignments. And in my scenario, I've got 3 assignments. I've got some admin assignments, some annual budget stuff, and some compensation planning. If I expand my annual budget, I've got a couple of different tasks. I've got to do my admin expenses and my travel expenses. So we're basically starting to spoon feed people on what they need to do. On the report side of things, I've got access to certain reports. And again, the way our system works, it's all dynamic. So depending on who you are, we basically tell you these are the reports you have access to. These are assignments that we want you to do. So we're controlling all that centrally. And then we have templates, which templates is where an administrator will go in to basically build the templates and build the reports. So most people will only see assignments and reports, or maybe just assignments, or maybe just reports, kind of depending on who they are. Another thing that we have is we've got the ability to have multiple languages. We are in Canada, so we've built the software so we can, handle English, French as well. Right now we have Spanish as well. But if you've got additional language requirements, we can manage that as well. Okay, so I'm going to go and show you kind of how you enter a budget and how we go through the whole budgeting process. So as a user, I'm going to come in. I'm going to say, okay, I need to do my annual budget, and I'm going to do my admin expenses. So one of the things we do, we basically define the start date and end date. So we start to control when you can start entering your budget, but more importantly, when that budget ends. So we can say, okay, as of this date, the budget is cut off. There's no more input into the budgeting process. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to open my budget. And what this is doing is going out there and looking at my template. So typically the first thing we do is on the first tab is we give you instructions saying, here's how you do your budget. Typically people are not budgeting more than once a year or once a quarter. So, we just want to give them instructions. So in this scenario, we're saying to navigate the worksheet, go to the input tab, enter the values in the yellow shaded cells. And we don't want any increases over 20% over last year. So we're kind of saying, here's the rules and guidelines for the budgeting process for this template. So I'm going to go into my input. And input is where I'm going to have my variables, slicers, dimensions, whatever you want to call it. These are the things I want to be able to budget on. So in my scenario, I've got my departments, locations, and so forth. So if I look at my departments, it's going to give me a list of all the departments that me as a user has access to. So in my scenario, I've got a bunch of different departments that I can enter budgets for. If I only had access to the admin department, it would just show me the admin department. So this is where I tell it which department I want to go and enter my budget for. We also have what we call hierarchical views. And these are it's just another way to enter a budget or to look at a budget. So if we're rolling things up or if we're kind of doing merging, it's just a matter of saying, okay, I want to merge my Toronto office with my Toronto warehouse with my new location, and maybe bring that into Ontario and so forth. So it's just a matter of clicking the ones you want, and that automatically will manage that whole merge process for you. Now this can be used for looking at the budget, reviewing the budget, as well as for reporting. And when we do this, we can either have it all summarized, consolidated, or we can have it column by column, depending on how you want to see your budget. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to retrieve my data. So this is going to go out there and retrieve the data. The other things we have is we have unlimited number of versions. So you can do what if analysis for as many versions as you like, as well as we handle multi-currency. So we can handle as many currencies as you like for entering and reporting. So we've got the options for all of those. So now the system's gone ahead and created my template for me. And basically it's just an Excel spreadsheet. The difference is we've added a lot of functionality and a lot of additional things for budgeting that'll make this a lot easier for the end users. So the first thing is anything in yellow we've defined is for data entry. Anything in gray is locked down, so you can't touch. So if I want to enter some information in there, it's locked down. Colors, shades, fonts, things like that are controlled by you guys. So everything's configurable. Basically, you know, we just whatever you can do in Excel, you can do within our system. To enter data, it's pretty straightforward. You can just enter numbers, just like Excel, because I am in Excel. So I can enter my numbers. You know, I can do copy and paste. I can do, you know, drag and drop. If I have a formula, here's my formula. Again, it's just Excel formulas. So as a user, you know, once they're comfortable with Excel, they can do whatever they want. Now, the nice thing, we allow them to do whatever formulas they want. All we really care about is the data, because we're basically going to be storing the data at every intersection. So in this scenario, we don't care how they came up with $1,000, but that's what's going to be going into our database. So it's going to show up for the supplies, hardware count for the budget for January 19th. We're going to have $1,000 as soon as we save that transaction. Okay. We let users do pretty well, you know, most of the functionality within Excel. There's a few things that we close off, but you know, if they go to their home tab and they want to do some of the additional things that Excel allows you to do. So for example, you know, they do conditional formatting and things like that, then we allow them all that. So most of the functionality, probably 90–95% of Excel is still available to them. We just kind of shut down some things that'll affect their budget. Okay, some of the additional things that we've done outside from this is we've given you a whole bunch of tools to be able to make budgeting faster. So we've got what we call our data tools. And our data tools are just different ways to manipulate the data. So for example, when you're doing budget, a lot of times you basically say, okay, you know, I like these numbers, but I want to increase some of them by a certain amount. So I want to take these three and that one, and I want to increase it by, you know, an even amount or a percentage or a certain value. So I'm going to say, I want to increase all those numbers by 10%. And I can just go ahead and increase it. So again, you know, we're giving you some simple tools to do that. The other thing that we've done is we've built a whole bunch of seasonality rules into the system. Some are pre-configured, some can be customized or tailored to whatever you want. So right now, we've got some pre-configured ones that say, you know, begin high, end high, or middle high. We've also got one that says, okay, if your seasonality is very similar to last year, why don't we just take last year's actuals and use that as our seasonality? So what would happen is I would just basically highlight, you know, these three fields here. And I can see for last year, my seasonality was starting high, going middle, and then going back a little bit higher. So if I want to do that, and I want to just enter a number, rather than entering a number and dividing it by 12, I can just say, okay, I want my my budget to be based on last year's actuals. And this year I'm going to have, rather than 11,000, I'm going to have 13,000. Go ahead and replace it, and that'll go through and automatically populate my cells for me. You know, if I basically highlighted the whole sheet, it would be the same kind of idea. So we've got a lot of power and a lot of flexibility how we do that. Okay. Another nice feature that we have is we've got the ability to also use the tools for doing things based on a certain number. So for example, if I look at all of my supply accounts, right? If I look at the totals for all of these, right now my total is at 18,983. But I know that's not going to fly. It's a little bit higher than I want it to be. I want it to be maybe, you know, $18,000. But I really like the way everything's laid out. I like my percentages. I like the way my ratios are working out. But I don't want to go through every cell and try and figure out how to do that. So what we've done is we've given you the ability to say, enter a budget number. So my budget number now is going to be 18,000. Highlight the cells that you want, and then go ahead and replace them. Now this has gone through and updated all these cells, and I made my total 18,000. Again, you know, it's something that's not very easy to do in Excel. It can be very time consuming. We're just trying to figure out how we make things easier and faster for end users to go and enter their data. Okay. So that's a little bit about how we navigate through the system. It's pretty straightforward. So what I want to do is show you a couple other features. So we've also got the ability to enter notes. So in Excel, you've got the ability to enter notes by right-clicking, and you enter your note. You know, I think most people are familiar with that. But what happens in that scenario, as soon as you start merging your spreadsheets, those notes disappear. So that note is attached to that particular spreadsheet. In our world, we can take any cell and attach notes, and we can attach unlimited number of notes. So you can have multiple notes on a cell. and those notes will travel with that cell. If I want to enter a new note, I can say, okay, this is a new note. So I can enter whatever text I want. As well, I can do attachments. So I can basically attach whatever document I want. So if I have a spreadsheet with some backup documentation, or if I have a quote, or if I have a business case for why things are happening, basically you can attach whatever document you want to your notes. And those notes will travel with that intersection or with that piece of data. So again, for my supplies hardware account, if I add this note's going to travel with it. Anywhere it shows up on any other template, and any roll-up or in any report, the note will be there with it. Okay. If I look at another note here, I've got a note for printer. In this scenario, I've attached a quote of the printer, so you can see, the quotes right there. So what it's allowing us to do, it's allowing us to do some collaboration. So as people are working with the system, they can basically add or enter whatever information they need. Hold on for a second. I've got my panels blocking me, so I can't close this off. Just open this up and move it over. Okay. Okay, so that's a little bit on notes. Okay. Next thing I'm going to talk about is a little bit about security and controls. As I mentioned earlier, Excel is our interface, but we're only using it for our user experience. Everything is controlled in a central database. It's a SQL database, so as soon as you enter or save a transaction, automatically goes into our system. There's no spreadsheets floating around. There's backups, so if you back up your system, it's all centrally backed up, so you don't need to worry about your data moving from place to place. Okay. The other thing we've done is we've given you the ability to have audit trails. So anytime a field changes, we keep track of who's done it, where it was done, and what the field was. So in our scenario here, for my supplies hardware account, this is every time that the information was changed. We track who's changed it, what assignment it was, and so forth. And the reason behind this is we want to make sure that users are very comfortable that if they entered a number, it is their number, because we want them to make sure that they're accountable for it. If for whatever reason that number got changed, they can see who changed it, when it was changed, maybe why it was changed. If they like another number better, let's say I like this number better here, I can always revert back to it. So we've got full history, full audit trail, and everything that's ever happened in the system. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, we also lock things down. So if they want to go into their actuals and they want to type something in, they can't. Our information is coming from the ERP system, so we're going to be integrating to your Sage 300 application. And as soon as we bring that information in, it's locked down. We don't want users to go in there and start changing it and playing around with it. Okay. Something else that we have, I'm not sure if you noticed, but as I've been entering my numbers, I've got these little red lights and green lights and so forth. And these are really conditional rules that we can put into the system for helping us ensure that we enter the right numbers. In our scenario, basically, we have that if you enter numbers between 0 and 10%, we're going to have a green light. If it's between 10 and 20%, it's going to be a yellow light. And if it's over 20%, it's going to be a red light. Remember, when I first went into the system, we basically told the users, we don't want you to enter anything over 20%. So we can set the system up so that we give them a red light and allow them to enter a number and allow it to go through for approval, or we can lock it down and say, if you're entering anything over 20%, it's going to go red, and we're not going to let you submit that for approval because it's automatically going to get rejected. So depending on your process, depending on your workflow, we've got the option to do both, but it's something that's kind of a nice visual cue for users to see what they're doing. So if I enter some information, let's say into my dues and subscription account, last year my number was 11,000. So if I enter, something like 11,000 in here, it's going to stay red. If I enter another 2,000, it's going to go yellow because I'm between 10 and 20%. If I enter another 3,000, it's going to go red. So as a user, I can see what's going on. As well, you notice my graphs up here start to change. We can embed graphs into our templates. So, we can give, again, more visual cues to users to say, okay, our numbers are within parameters or they're within certain guidelines to make sure that everything, everything makes sense when you start to look at and review your budget. Another thing that we have is we've got a very sophisticated workflow engine that works in the background. At any point in time, you can take a look at the engine and see the status of any of your templates. Are they in progress? Are they completed? When were they last touched? Any notes? any validation messages and things like that. So if you're managing the whole budgeting process, you can see who's worked on what templates, when was the last time they touched it, and so forth. So you're starting to get some good visibility into what is happening in your process, as well as our workflow engine is very sophisticated. So we can move things straight forward, or we can move them up and down. We can do kind of have different people reporting to different departments and so forth. Okay. So that's a little bit on the security and controls. As you can see, we've done a lot of things to just make Excel a lot more powerful and a lot more of an enterprise tool. Last thing I'm going to talk about is access to data and reporting. So the one thing that we wanted to make sure is that users have a lot of access to information as they're entering their budget. So the one thing we've given you is the ability to enter line items. If you look at certain GL accounts like employee training, typically you track that at the GL level, but there's always like a backup schedule saying these are the classes, who's going to be trained, and it's either maintained in a separate spreadsheet or it's maintained in some other system. With TrueSky, we allow you to actually enter line item details on the fly. So for example, in this scenario here, I've got my employee training is made up of these three courses. And they can just basically go and enter the transaction. If I want to enter a new class, I just basically say add a new line item detail, and I can say training class for George, and then I'm going to give them access, $500 for January, $300 for February, and $400 for March. And you'll see my numbers are changing, and these things end up rolling up into my employee training account. Now, again, anywhere this employee training account shows up, on any template or on any report, these line items are available. So when you're comparing your budget versus actual, 6 months down the road, and you can say, okay, why am I over budget or why am I under budget? You can see, okay, I've accounted for 4 people for my training, but only, we had 3 employees, or we added some additional employees. So it just makes it a lot better for you to try and compare your numbers when you're doing your budget versus actual. And you don't have to go to any other system to get that information. Another thing that we have is we've got the ability to link into other systems. So by that, what I mean is we provide you with TrueSky the ability to drill down into other applications. So in my scenario here, I want to go and take a look at my transactions for last year. So I want to look at my actuals for last year, and I want to be able to drill down with them. So I've got $136,000 worth of transactions, and I want to see what makes up those numbers. So what I can do what we call a link into that data. And what it does, it puts it into a table for us. And this is really a query into your ERP system. So right now what we're doing is we're actually doing a query into your Sage 300 application and bringing in the GL information into this view. If you've got other applications, like CRM or HR or some other kind of systems that you want to integrate to as well, we can do that. Now, the nice thing about our application is we're only bringing in the view data. We're not having to integrate all that data into our platform. Some of the other tools out there, that allow you to do drill downs, they require you to have all that information in their application. With TrueSky, we're actually doing calls into other systems. So once we have that data in our table, we can start manipulating it. So I can just go to my totals, I can sort them from high to low. I can do all kinds of things like, look at the average, look at the top 10 transactions. If I want to see, okay, what's the total for those top 10 transactions? It's $19,000. So as I'm doing my budget, I can kind of start looking at things, from last year and kind of saying, okay, what's this year going to look like compared to last year? What are some of the, the variables that were affecting last year and so forth. I can also let me just clear this out. Do some groupings. So for example, I've got this information here, which is great, but I want to view it in a different format. I want to say group it by description, and maybe being in my vendor name. So now I've got everything by GL description and by vendor name. And I can scroll through my GL accounts, and I can say my supply software account looked kind of strange. So I want to kind of drill down into that. And I can see it's made up of 5 vendors. I'm going to see mobile warehouse had 2 transactions, so I'm going to go take a look at that one and say, okay, what happened? And I can see, okay, there were 2 transactions. One was an office upgrade, which is fine because it should have been posted to that account. But the other one, we did a purchase. We purchased a tablet for Alan, which should have been posted into the supplies hardware account. So as I'm doing my budget, if my numbers, kind of don't look right, or like last year's numbers don't look right, and saying, why was that so high? I can actually start drilling down into those transactions at any time and seeing what makes that up. And again, these links are configurable to every environment. So depending on what you want to see, how many columns you want to see, what details you want to see, they can be built. And we can integrate to pretty well any application that allows us to see their data. The other thing that we can do is we can also integrate to other components. If you've got some documents on your network that basically have some, here's some HR information, here's all of our staff levels and the rates and things like that. We can link you to that from within here. So when a user is doing some compensation planning or anything like that, they don't need to go out to another system. If they need to go out to the internet to do a call to get some information on exchange rates or things like that, again, we can create all these links, and the system will allow you to get access to pretty well whatever data you need to help you build your budget. Okay. So that's a little bit on the access to data. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just show you a little bit on the reporting side of things. So I'm just going to go back to my hub and go to my reports. So we can pretty well build any kind of report that you need. So I'm just going to go look at a simple financial statement. And we can build basically, balance sheet, income statement, statement of changes, cash flows, things like that. We can also bring the data back into Sage 300. So if you're using other tools, like that to produce your reports, we can bring our budget information back into Sage 300. But we give you the option of building reports within our application or within Sage. And some clients use both. Some clients use ours. Some clients just use Sage directly. So depending on what you need and so forth. So in this case scenario, I'm going to be doing my budget for my income statement for my admin department for my Toronto headquarters. So right now the system will go through and generate the report for me. And again, this is going to be a fairly generic, simple income statement. Again, we can do some pretty complex calculations and we can put things into any columns you want and so forth. So here's my statement. And again, it's in Excel. So formatting, colors, fonts, anything like that is controlled by you guys. And you can make the statements look, presentation type statements if you want. So I've got my simple income statement here. I got my year-to-date budget, variances, and so forth. So I'm going to start expanding. So my revenues right now, they're broken up into GL accounts, but they're basically grouped. I've kind of grouped things into a certain level. My admin expenses, I've got them in full detail. So you've got the option of grouping accounts any which way you want, or showing every account in detail if you like. If I start expanding my columns, I've got my actuals for the first 3 years and my forecast for the rest of the year. So we can create what we call rolling forecasts. And the system has time intelligence. So as soon as I close off April, the system will automatically put in the actuals for April and continue with the forecast for the rest of the year. So without having you to do anything. So we've tried to kind of automate all that process because most customers do some forecasting every month, and they can basically just automatically take the actuals from Sage 300, put them into our system. You don't need to worry anything about it. If you expand the next column, we've got our budget, and if we go further out, we've got our variances. Okay, so pretty straightforward, pretty simple report. As I mentioned, we can, if you've got multiple divisions, we can put division 1, 2, 3 in the different columns, do consolidations of them, compare them budget versus actual, put percentages, do whatever kind of calculations you needed to do. As well, we also handle all the multi-currency requirements that you need. Okay, so that's kind of a high-level, simple statement. Pretty well, as long as the data is within our system, we can use our tool to do the reporting of it, and we're basically using a lot of the functionality within Excel to create a report. We've also got the ability to create some dashboards. We're not a dashboarding or a BI tool. So if you've got your own BI tool that you're currently working with, you could use that. Our database is open, so we allow you to take access to all of our data and produce whatever dashboards and reports you want. But if you haven't done much on the dashboarding side of things, this is a simple way to start. We take advantage of a lot of the objects within Excel. So over here, I've got some simple dashboards. I've got top customers, underperforming salespeople, sales by city, and we can take advantage of some of the things that Excel has by product, by color. If I look at some financial information, we have expense comparisons, employees by category, revenue breakdowns, average fuel costs. So whatever information that you have that's available in the system, we can create dashboards for. But again, these are pretty straightforward dashboards that are kind of using the Excel objects. If you want something more sophisticated, whatever tool you're using, we can integrate to that. Okay, so that's a little bit on our application. Again, high level, we've got a ton of functionality that I haven't really got into. Just kind of wanted to give you a flavor of what we look like and how we work. So what I'd like to do next is just talk a little bit about our integration into Sage 300. So I'm just going to go back to my slideshow. And we've got some very strong integration points with Sage 300. So just want to talk about some of the items that we integrate from 300 to TrueSky. Basically, we'll take your chart of accounts, initial and ongoing. And ongoing is a big challenge. A lot of systems out there, allow you to create the initial import, but anytime you add a new GL account in Sage 300, you've got to go back into their application to do it. We manage all this for you automatically. So if you add a new GL account in Sage 300, it will automatically show up in TrueSky. We'll bring in the actuals, initial and ongoing edits. We'll bring in your budget if you have any budgets in Sage 300, so we can compare that as well. And out of the box, we also can handle multiple companies, assuming they've got the same chart of account structure. Items that we integrate back to Sage 300, we can bring in the final budgets from TrueSky into Sage 300. So if you're doing your reporting on SEI or SI or some other reporting tools, you can continue using that. We don't force you to use our tools, but they are available. We've also integrated to project, or we can also integrate to subledgers if you want. Out of the box, these are generic integrations, but if you need some additional integrations, we can do that as well. We've done a lot of work with project. And our integrations can be either scheduled or run on demand, or both. Most of our customers are running it on a scheduled basis, so they'll integrate, usually nightly. Some customers will do it more often. They want to, they need their actuals more often, but most customers find that, running it nightly is enough. But we also give you the option to do a manual override, for example, at month end or year end, or just before you close off your budget. If there's some transactions that hit your GL that you want to make sure that they're part of your actuals, we allow you to go in there and do a manual integration to bring your numbers back up to speed. Okay, so that's kind of at a high level our presentation. If there's any questions, this is a good time. So in review, just want to talk about some of the things that I've showed you. We talked about ease of use, how we use Excel as a user experience, how we provide control around that. I showed you how we have our tools, how we allow you to enter notes, how we allow you to change and control things, how we allow you to take advantage of all the functionality within Excel, but we can basically start locking things down. On the security and control side of things, we have a start date, end date, so we control when the budget cycle begins. We've got a whole workflow engine built into our application. We've got full audit trails showing you anytime a user made a change, things like that. And on the reporting and access to information, I showed you how we have line item detail to allow you to build up things into your budget, how we can drill down into other applications, and how you can produce some reports and some dashboards. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, this is probably a good time to ask them.
Thank you so much for that, George. Again, if anybody has any additional questions, feel free to pop them in either question and answers or into the chat box, but I do have a few that did come in. One attendee was asking, does this work with Google Sheets or is it only work with Excel?
We only work with Excel right now.
Okay.
Most customers are using Excel, but unfortunately, that's all we work with at this point.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
Can you leave a note that is related to an audit trail?
No, I think the audit trails are basically there just to track every time a change was made. But if you do make a change to a cell, you can put in a note, and then you can basically see it at any point in time. But it's not tied directly to the audit trail. So the audit trails are separate.
We have another question about licensing requirements for drill down to ERP system.
Yes. You don't need additional licenses. We're just doing a SQL query into the other applications. So you don't need to buy additional Sage licenses. We can just do a call into that. Now, if you're using the web component of Sage and you want to, log in directly through Sage, we actually can use our tool to do that. And at that point, you would need a user license. But if we're just doing a direct query, then we don't.
Okay. How does it handle budgets based on sales volume or difference by month?
Well, we can handle as many drivers as you like. So we can start building our templates based on drivers. So we can say, okay, multiply things by a certain sales volume and have this, happen, or that kind of thing. I think that's kind of the question. I'm not sure if I answered it, but basically, any formula you can do within Excel or any kind of calculation that you need to do, we can do that within TrueSky, and we can create drivers to drive other parts of our process or other parts of our templates. So hopefully answer that. If not, maybe we can give us some more detail on what they're looking for.
Yeah, I just sent a message to that question, attendee. Is this in the cloud, or is there a cloud-based option for somebody who's using a cloud ERP?
Yes, we've got the option to be on a private cloud, on a public cloud, or on premises. So we give the customers option and whichever way they want to go. So we can handle all three.
Okay, we've got lots of questions for you. Could you take a moment to kind of go over the pricing for how this works? Is it user-based? Is it specific to roles?
Yeah. Okay, our pricing is pretty simple. We've got two levels of pricing. We've got subscription pricing and we've got perpetual pricing. So again, we're giving the customer the choice. And we really have three user types. And we basically price per user. So we've got a full-blown user that you can basically do everything in the system. And you need to be, so if you're an input person, then you're basically a full-blown user. We've got a reporting and approver user. So this is a user more like a manager that would just approve. They wouldn't enter any data, but they would just approve and do reporting. Or we just have a reporting only user that basically all they do is a system to view reports. So those are our three user types. So we've kind of kept it pretty simple. A user has access, like a full-blown user has access to everything in the system. And if you've got multiple companies, we don't care either. We just basically care on the number of users that are using the application. And just to give you an idea of price, like on the subscription side of things, a full-blown user is $948 per user, so just a little bit under $1,000 per user per year, just to give you an idea. And the other levels are lower. So the reporting user and the reporting and approver user are less than that.
Thanks for that. Hopefully that answers your question on pricing. Does this work to budget for revenue and sales? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we can do, we can basically use this tool for any kind of budgeting, whether it's financial budgeting, compensation planning, sales forecasting, capital expenditures, or anything like that. So if you want to budget on revenue, we can do that either by customer, by product. We've got customers doing it, in different ways. And basically, what would just give you, saying here's your customers and the budget for that, or here's the customers and here's the products that you want them to budget by, or maybe here's budgeting by product and come up with the revenue. And again, because we're driver based, we can basically leave out the pricing, so we can control the pricing and just let the reps either enter the quantities or the units that they're going to be selling, or things like that. So we've got a lot of flexibility in how we want to do revenue or sales forecasting.
Are there any canned reports like GL transaction listings?
No, we're pretty well a blank sheet when we come out of the box. Pretty well, we find everybody does things a little bit differently. Building reports is fairly straightforward, but every implementation is a little bit unique. So, we would take your existing chart of accounts, bring them in, figure out what dimensions or slicers you want to kind of start budgeting by, and build a system on that. So we it's a little bit more time consuming, but we provide you with a lot more flexibility, and we tailor the system to your requirements.
Is there a way to send the budget or the reports for approvals?
Yes.
Is it something somebody can easily save and share?
Well, as soon as they save their template, depending on the workflow, as soon as they go ahead and submit it, it'll go to the manager for approval. So our workflow engine takes care of all that. It'll go to the next level up.
Awesome. The next one we have is, can you discuss a little bit more about Sage 300 project budgeting integration? Can you use the SQL script to upload to PJC? And is there an option for PJC budget and keep synchronizing?
The answer is yes. I'm not an expert on that, but I know we've integrated to project. And the main reason was a lot because of the reporting project is so difficult within Sage 300. So, we basically created the budgets and brought in the actuals and did all the reporting out of our application. Again, we can follow up with that question and provide you more details how that's done. But we have integrated to project in the past.
Okay, and then I just have two more questions for you. Can it pull open PO values so they know the amount of dollars committed versus the actual dollars?
In theory, yes. We'd have to see how it's all stored in, say, 300 and how they want to do it. But yeah, as long as the data is available to us, then we can bring it into our application, and then we can compare that to our budgets.
And is there a price per user? Sorry, is the price per user the only cost, or is there a maintenance cost or anything in addition to that price per user?
Yeah, well, it depends. If you go with subscription, then the price per user is the price per user. If you go with the perpetual model, then basically you buy the software, and just like Sage, then we have our maintenance, which is a yearly 20%. So if you go perpetual, then there's a yearly, still another 20% yearly fee. If you go subscription, then you just pay your annual subscription, and that's the only cost. The only additional costs are implementation costs, implementation training, and if you need any ongoing support, which is standard with any application.
Perfect. Well, that's all the questions we had come in. If anybody has any additional questions that they haven't popped into the chat window, do reach out to your BAASS account manager, or if you don't have a BAASS account manager, just reach out to us directly, and we'll make sure we get those questions answered for you and get you connected with TrueSky or with George.
Okay. So yeah, so there's no other questions. Yeah. Thank you for your time. And again, if you think of anything, just feel free to reach out to BAASS, and we'll work with them to make sure we answer any of your questions. And if you need additional requirements, or if you really like our system, then we can, again, reach out to BAASS, and we'll work with you guys to review your requirements and to see how we can help you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, George, and thank you so much to all the people who were able to attend today.
Thank you.